today. I think there's only a couple of people left in the waiting room now. So thank you so much for your patience. And hi, everyone. Lovely to see familiar faces. And thanks to those of you who are coming to a Fair Collective event for the first time. If you're new to Fair Collective, I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain who we are. Oh, we've still got our Small Charity Week logo on here that I didn't realise. So ignore that. We did quite a few free events during Small Charity Week last year, which may be how some of you came across us for the first time. But Fair Collective is a social enterprise matchmaking agency, essentially, for the charity sector. We match social purpose organisations, mostly charities and CICs, with expert freelancers and consultants who cover all specialisms from fundraising to strategy, HR to web design and everything in between. The only work that we don't take on is legal work because we have the wonderful Law Works. If you're not familiar with them, they provide pro bono legal support to UK registered charities. We do day rates by income level so that organisations of all different shapes and sizes can access the expertise that they need. And 50% of our profits are donated to super small charities through our pro bono work. We've been operating in this way for about 8 years. Since day one, we've always been upfront about our day rates. And we started out specifically as an organisation to support small charities, but we quickly grew into supporting all different shapes and sizes. But the majority of our client base is still small charities with an income of less than about 250,000. So thank you for being here today. I'm going to hand over to Wayne in a sec. You can get a little sense of the kind of organisations that we work with here. We're very grateful for the clients that keep coming back to us. So if some of you listed on there are here with us today, then thank you for coming back. And I'm going to hand over to Wayne now, who is going to talk to us about strategy, which I know is something that is almost always on our to-do lists as small charity leaders. I'll not start to encroach on your turf here, Wayne, so I will introduce you and let you crack on. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vic. Lovely to see you again. Lovely to be here with you all. I'm really aware how busy people are, so the fact that you've turned up kind of digitally in person is really great, so thank you for that. In terms of me, my name's Wayne. I've worked in the charity sector since last century. I suppose what's peculiar about me is that half of my career has been spent working directly for charities and half has been spent kind of charity agency side. So charity side, I've had senior leadership positions at Prisoners Abroad, at Refugee Action and at Amnesty International, so quite people-powered, mobilisation-driven organisations. And agency side, I've always worked in the guise of strategy, whether that be fundraising strategy, engagement strategy, brand strategy, all of that sort of stuff. But against my better judgment at the start of lockdown, I set up on my own. So I set up my consultancy, Humanity Squared, and it was kind of fueled by COVID, really, and the changes that were happening in the charity sector because of it. A lot of the stuff that I've been banging on about for years in terms of how we come together, how we orchestrate things, how we can change and do things differently was starting to happen. So it felt like a good time to do that. Most of my work revolves around organizational design and strategy and all of the strategic stuff that falls out of that. What underpins all of my work is a belief in shifting power and centre and lived experience and collaboration. I think that's the most important thing for strategy development going forward. And I suppose my values come to life when I talk about my pricing model. So the big ticket stuff that I do for large global organizations enables me to drastically reduce my day rate for small to medium sized charities, which then enables me to do what it is that I really love, which is free work with grassroots and community organizations, because not everyone can afford decent consultancy, and also the knowledge needs to bubble up through the sector. So I don't think it's trickling down. And it's because of the sort of free and discounted work that I'm doing with small and micro charities that has led me to this kind of presentation I'm going to give today, which is about organizational strategy for small, busy charities, and how a successful strategy doesn't have to be built on this idea of having an away day where everyone comes along and contributes to making strategy in a day. And what might be a better idea is to kind of break that down into 8 weekly 1-hour sessions to give more thinking and breathing space for that. And I suppose what I'd like to also comment on is the fact that this presentation is happening against the backdrop of Fair Collective launching their recent report on the mental health crisis that is happening in the small charity sector, and just how stretched small charity leaders are, which I feel, and I work with a lot of leaders who are feeling that as well. So I really hope that this presentation is kind of received in the spirit in which it's given, and that spirit is around hope and help and some kind of practical support for you. So yeah, what I'd like to talk about a little bit is kind of a different way of approaching strategy. And who is this for? This is for like really small and micro charities that have got limited capacity and funds. It's not your traditional strategy design roadmap, so don't try and compare this to any of the strategy textbooks that you might have. It's a very different idea. It's for organizations that have a low headcount and not a lot of time for strategy development. But it's also for organizations that understand that sometimes, no matter how busy you are, you need to get off the hamster wheel of tactical delivery and plan for the future. What a lot of organizations need, rather than a very detailed 80-page strategy, is a kind of sense of direction and to know that they're on the right path, which enables them to say yes to things and equally to say no to things as well. But it's also for organizations that need things to make sense and with as little jargon as possible. So what I've tried to do here is to create something that's quite human, quite warm, quite engaging, but also answers some of the bigger questions that you need to kind of focus on when it comes to your strategy development. So it's not a traditional template, but these aren't traditional times. And it's been developed from what I'm actually doing. So it isn't abstract or theoretical or academic. This has been kind of designed and tweaked and adjusted with small charities in mind. So co-creation is at the core of what's happened here. And I've done this about 35 times with different charities using this framework. And what I can say is that what comes out of it is like really incredibly different strategies. But what they all have in common is that they're all really, really vibrant and really brilliant and really real. So that's the who. This is the what. So ultimately, what I aim to do is to give you a process that you can own. And it's not something that's being done to you. I think a lot of strategy design falls down when, you know, a consultant swings in his linen suit and kind of does strategy to you. So this is no place for gurus. It's giving you a really loose framework that you can make your own, that you can feel comfortable in, where hopefully you can bring together people in a really meaningful way, not tokenistically. And come up with something that's quite logical and that works for you. It's going to give you the ability to collectively look back and also to collectively look forward. And the conversations that you have become part of the strategy, and the document that you get at the end is just a receipt of the decisions that you've made. So it enables all voices to be heard, but I think it's really important to say that it doesn't mean that every idea is going to be taken forward, but every voice will be heard to help shape it. And it's really balanced against the fact that everyone is busy. I go into all of these scenarios thinking that everyone who's taken part is at capacity. So it's really brilliant that they're there, but you also need the biggest bang for your buck or for your time. So what you'll need, the most important thing that you'll need and central to any kind of collaboration is the right people. So take time to think about this really carefully. You need representation from staff, from volunteers, from trustees, from service users. It's always important to have lived experience at the heart of what you're doing. So really think about who it is that you're bringing on board. If you can get people involved from other charities that are working within your ecosystem as well, that adds a sort of external perspective. So really focus on that. The idea here is to shift power to centre lived experience and to enable you to get to the truth. Ideally, everyone comes to the 8 weekly sessions, but the world isn't ideal. So if you can record each sessions to enable people to kind of catch up and to get involved, and allocate the right amount of time. I've built this around 8 1-hour sessions, but that really is the minimum. If you can do more, that's absolutely great. What you will need is a facilitator. So if you can afford an external facilitator, brilliant. If you can't, then you'll have to use someone internally, which can be equally as good. But what I would say is to change that facilitator every session to enable everyone to kind of take part, so that someone isn't just taking over the facilitator's role and not being able to speak. Facilitation is really important. Even if you're a micro charity and there's just 3 people around the table, it's good to have the rigor of someone facilitating, prodding, getting things back on track, that sort of thing. You're also going to need someone to take notes. Once again, if that's someone internal, try and shake it up at every session so that everyone can have their say as well as writing. And your single most important thing for this, and where all of the magic comes from, is as well as a digital platform to meet on, is that you need an open Google Doc. This is going to be super important. It's going to be your secret weapon. It's the golden thread that connects each of the sessions and where a lot of the magic comes from. So set up an open Google Doc that everyone who's participating can have access to. And importantly, you need an open mind, and you need to dial down any ego that you have, and try not to have any preconceived ideas on the direction that you're going to go, because an open mind will enable you to really think differently and to think in a much more unusual way, which is where the best strategy ideas come from. And what you'll end up with, hopefully, is a clearer sense of direction for the org that's been decided collectively, by the many and not the few. And what you'll also have is some quite clear and mutually agreed strategic foundation. And for some organizations, that's kind of all that you need. I would love everyone to have fully formed strategies, but the reality of kind of the environment that we're working in and just how hard it is out there is that sometimes foundations and the direction of travel is kind of all you need to enable your decision making. What you might get is kind of a strategy on a page. Hopefully you will, or at least a unified voice on what you're going to do, which is something to build on. There we go. To build on. And maybe you'll actually have something that makes sense and something that you'll remember. And what I would say to you is that, do you remember that swap that you did 5 years ago? No, nor does anyone else. So hopefully a sense of collaboration and collective ownership is going to be much more helpful for you. And also this way of working, what feedback that I've had from a lot of small charities is that after the 8 weeks has finished, this way of coming together in the future for collective problem solving is really helpful in an ongoing capacity. So, if you have the luxury of time, maybe embed that and use that weekly hour for other ways to collectively solve problems and issues and to think creatively. So for those of you who like to screenshot slides to whack up on their socials, I think the next one is probably the one that you're gonna want, and that's the fact that you will get more creative ideas emptying the dishwasher than you will from staring at a blank flip chart. You really will. You hear it all the time. I work really strange hours, and the best ideas I have come at very strange times and not when I'm staring at a Google Doc or a blank flip chart. So this idea over an 8-week period is to try and capture all of that creativity rather than condense it down to one day when you have to be creative. So, hopefully it opens up horizons in that way. But I suppose the real question is, why split out this process over 8 hours rather than one day? And it comes from the fact that small micro charities, what they would ask of me quite a lot is the fact that, we have this away day. There's this one time of the year when everyone can come together. We need to maximize on this day. This needs to be the day that we build this strategy. And I don't know about you, but have you ever been to any of those away days or those planning sessions? They can be hugely successful, and it's always a good idea to bring people together and to meet and to physically be around each other. There's great energy and great things happen from that, but they're also really stressful, and I think a lot hangs on them. And those days normally start with a blank piece of paper rather than being at the end of a process when it's about fine-tuning and kind of sorting things out. So there's a rhythm to it that sometimes goes wrong, and I've been equally responsible for facilitating those as well as taking part in them. They're usually rushed. There's usually this feeling that because people don't come together physically that often, that it takes a while to kind of get in the vibe of it, and it's slow to start, and then it speeds up towards the end, and it's at the end that you need to make some quite brutal and big decisions, and it's always really quite rushed, especially at the end. The amount of sessions that I've been to where there's just coloured dots everywhere and facilitators screaming that decisions need to be made, and maybe they're not the right decisions. Maybe you're just doing it because you're trying to make a decision within a preconceived time frame. Also, it suits some brains and not all brains. I think it's not great for everyone if people are quieter and more reflective or need time to think. It's not the best environment to get the best out of everyone. Most of my good thoughts come at 2 a.m. and I don't see many creative sessions that are happening around there. There's also no time to recalibrate, and I think sometimes with those day events things can go off down some quite romantic vistas pretty quickly, and it's kind of hard to pull things back on track. So that's quite difficult as well. You don't want to go down a weird route. And the thing that I would like to say before we get into kind of what the content of the sessions could or should be is that the space between the sessions, the weekly sessions, is more important than the sessions themselves. They are. That's where you're going to get those creative ideas from. And doing this just gives more time to breathe, and breathing is super important. We all know that we can change our mindset by doing 5 deep breaths. So if we build breathing time into our strategy process, then hopefully we'll be able to think in a clearer way. So let's be traditional and let's start with session 1. So you've got everyone together, probably digitally. You've got really good representation in terms of stakeholders. You've got lived experience there. You're operating in a non-hierarchical way. So you start by looking back. If you're going to create a strategy that's focused on looking forward, you need to look back because you're not building on sand, you're building on history and heritage that you have from your organization. And I would suggest that the conversation is quite top line and quite creative in a way, that you just focus on kind of what's gone really well. And COVID is a really nice backstop to work from because everyone remembers it. So it's really good to kind of look back on the journey of your organization since COVID and to celebrate the things that have gone well, because you're still here, and as we know, many organizations aren't. So let's celebrate and be sympathetic about the things that have gone really well. What do we need to do more of? It could be things around, our culture changed since COVID, and that's really propped us up and helped us work in a different way. It could be that your service design has completely changed, or and you're doing things in a very different way, and that's something to celebrate and to reflect on. It could be that you've set up new projects, or you've pivoted, to use the COVID word, and you've got a different operating model, and that's really good. It could be some of the successes you've had from funding. Keep the conversation really flowing and enable people to say their piece, but also then have a break. Get outside, smell a flower, do whatever you need to do to change your mindset, but then think about what hasn't gone so well. Are there things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? Are there things that we're investing a lot of time in that might not be relevant now? Are there things that we want to scale back, or are there things that we want to ditch? And try and be a bit critical about that, just to get the brain cells thinking about, what is it that we don't want to do, or we want to do less of. And then, the really joyous bit about this is have a little bit, 10 minutes, 15 minutes about talking about what's absolutely essential. What do we have to always carry forward? What's the part of our organization that if we stop doing, we wouldn't be us? Because this is going to enable you to help find your DNA, like who you are, what is the bullseye of this organization that we can build out from. So keep it upbeat, have a really good conversation about that. Let it go off into different directions. Be curious about why people are focusing on the things that they're focusing on. And really focus on what that core DNA bit is as well. Now, I'm going to go through some practicalities for this that are applicable to all of the other sessions, but if I just do it for session 1, then you can see that the momentum builds. If you're not used to talking like this, or being in a sort of non-hierarchical environment where everyone's voice is equal, it can feel really weird to start with, if you're not used to talking like that, and that's totally okay. That's completely normal. Stick with it, lean into it. Don't be afraid of uncomfortable silences. Like, they happen. It's cool. Lean into that as well. It enables people to think rather than to just respond. Let the note taker take the notes, but also have that Google Doc open for absolutely everyone to contribute to, because some people, won't want to put their hand up, won't want to put their head above the parapet, but being able to, use that Google Doc just to put down thoughts or ideas or links or whatever, or doodles, however people operate. Really important to have that running as a twin track to the conversation that you're having. Try and cover as many aspects as you can. And obviously, I've set an hour here. If you've got more time, then that's great. Try to focus in the broadest possible terms. It's really easy to get drawn into detail, but try and scale back and to think big picture stuff in terms of what's working and what isn't. You won't cover everything, but the important stuff should bubble up. And also, there's a sort of belt and braces thing a few sessions down where we're a bit critical about, okay, are there any gaps? Is there anything missing? But, lean into the fact that you're not going to cover every aspect of the organization in an hour, because you won't. Then, importantly, after the session, encourage people to keep thinking about what was said, and if they have any thoughts, to keep adding it to the Google Doc. I get really excited when I'm working on projects like this, and I log in 3 days after to the Google Doc, and I see that somebody's in there, and I'm like, oh my god, it's working, someone's having a thought. Obviously, this isn't about adding extra capacity to people, but it's enabling people to use their brains in a way that works best for them. So it really works. And once all the thoughts are in from that and in one place, it's really important, this next phase, the facilitator or whoever is in charge of the notes needs to do 2 really, really important things. One, once you've got all the notes from the session together, the facilitator needs to kind of write some bullet points about what does this mean? What do we think this means? So it's digesting all of that kind of raw data just into, you know, a selection of points, which is just about digesting it, making some order from the conversation that was had and trying to rationalize it. And once you've got that in terms of what does it mean, the final step for that is to condense those notes to a few key thoughts titled "In a Nutshell." This is super important to keep things on track. So you have the raw notes, then you have someone condensing that and rationalize it into what does this mean, and then the final cherry on the top is kind of in a nutshell. And what you're looking for there is kind of 4-5 bullet points max statements that kind of summarize the complexity of the conversation that was had, and then from the what does it mean, and then into in a nutshell. Then do the next session. So the next session, you look back, next session is a really beautiful one. I really enjoy these ones. It's about looking forward. So first of all, to start off the session, take the in a nutshell bit from session 1 and have that as a sort of opener for session 2, but then focus on looking forward. You know, what are the opportunities for us, both internally and externally? I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but this could be along the lines of, well, what we're doing is fine, we think. You know, we're open to being questioned about that, but what we need to do is to kind of optimize what it is that we're already doing. So how do we do what we already do, but do it more effectively? How do we fix things? Conversely, it could be something along the lines of, well, we do this and we do that, but we don't do that. And that's what we need to do. We need to build something. So there's an opportunity for us to build something and to think about that. It could be something along the lines of, you know, the secrets of our success since COVID is kind of how we've evolved culturally. But, you know, we're at the next stage of our evolution, and how do we evolve into the next stage? So those big sort of rangy opportunities, but also balance it with internal and external. What are the internal opportunities? What are the external opportunities? And then flip it, have a cup of tea, and then come back. You know, what are the things that we need to look out for? You know, we're operating in a very chaotic and terrifying external environment. So what does that mean for us? What do we need to look out for internally? What are big issues like funding? How we're going to approach that? So once again, you won't be able to cover everything about this, but you need to touch on some of these things to just get a sort of litmus test for kind of how people are feeling, what people are focusing on, and kind of how that could work organizationally. And then for the final part of that session, let's vision what we would like the org to be doing in 3 years. You know, what's our ideal future collectively? And if you focus on like how individuals feel, and what individuals feel the org should look like in 3 years, what their vision is really interesting then to see if all of those individual opinions match up. That can be a really good starting point for kind of like, okay, how does this all work? So that's number 2. Same as number 1, facilitate, note taker, open Google Doc, keep the doc open after the session and encourage people to reflect and add thoughts, then get all the notes in one place, boil it down to what does it mean, and then boil it down further to in a nutshell. So that's session 2. Session 3, you've looked back, you've looked forward. Which way do you need to look now? You need to look sideways. And I think a really good, I use this tool all the time, and if you've never used it, have it and go and do it. But it's really interesting to run a session around, if we were setting up as a startup today, with all the historic knowledge that we have of this org and all of the experience, but the org didn't exist and we were setting up today, what would it look like? What would we be doing, and what would we be doing differently? And I think what's good about this session is that it gets rid of all the shit and all of the crap, because when you think about the future, you're immediately bogged down in the past and the present, and there are thoughts going through your head along the lines of, oh, we can't do that because we've always done this, and then there's this problem over here, and you get paralysis. But getting yourself into a mindset of saying, okay, we're setting up today, what would we look like and what would we be doing differently, means that you're not bogged down with current issues. It's a really different headspace, and you'll be surprised at what comes out of it. So it's really similar to the kind of looking forward idea, but from a different angle, an angle that has no baggage, and an angle that just visions what a perfect charity would look like. So have a look at that. Then for session 4, what you should find by this point is that there are some themes that are bubbling up. There will be ideas that people have coalesced around from previous sessions. There will be complexities, and there will be disparities, and there will be contradictions, but there will be themes that are emerging as well. So what are those themes that are emerging from the conversations so far? And then, maybe map them out, on a big foolscap piece of paper, or, on Trello or whatever. And then just have a think about what are the priorities here? What do we collectively think we definitely need to commit to, even if it's longer term? What are the short-term priorities? Is this actually a priority, or is this just a nice to have? But really lean into kind of what this could all look like. And it could be, themes emerging, like, what does our service provision look like? What does our culture look like? Are there particular tools that you need? Is it about infrastructure? Whatever, just what are those key themes that are emerging? What are the priorities? Dial down the nice to haves for now. And also, this is the belt and braces part, to kind of really think about what have we missed? Have we gone off down certain things and not had conversations about really important things like EDI or lived experience or collaboration outside of our organization, or the external environment. So have some time to sort of think about, okay, well, this is great, we're getting some things and priorities, but I think we've missed some really important stuff that we might need to go back. And if you need to add in extra sessions, or if you need to tweak or whatever, do it. Try and have this framework as elastic as you can based on the capacity that you have. So themes start to bubble up. And as we move into session 5, this is much more about kind of how do we articulate where we're going and what these themes actually mean. How do we articulate the future based on these priorities? How do we describe what is in the plan, what we're going to do, and importantly, what we're not going to do, because that's what strategy enables you to do as well. It could be things along the lines of statements that you collectively agree on, like even as brutal and as simplistic as "we are going to blah blah blah," "we are not going to blah blah blah." That's obviously not your polished final vision or North Star, but it'll enable you to articulate what it is that you're trying to do, and to focus on that. And how do we describe what it is that we're going to do in the fewest possible words? So once you're coalescing around an agreed direction of travel, how do we make that really plain, really obvious, and do it in the fewest amount of words? The less words you use, the more chance it is of being adopted and, importantly, remembered as well. So focus on that. Then as you've got a bit of articulation that's starting to happen, you can focus on key strategic pillars. So I would focus on what are the really big 4 themes, or the building blocks that are emerging from this, and what could be the sort of foundations of our strategy. And they could be things along the lines of a lot of the small charities I'm talking to at the moment. It's this issue around breadth versus depth. Is our focus going forward to help more people with the thing that we do, or is our focus going forward to enable the same amount of people, maybe even less people, in a deeper way? So that would be a real key theme and a building block for what that strategy kind of looks like. Is it about strategic funding? Our approach to funding has been very throw as much mud at the wall and see what sticks, and actually we need to get beyond year-end income and focus on multi-year funding. You know, think of what are the key strategic pillars that your organisation needs. You know, you could build it around the system change that you want to see. You know, how do we get to a point where we're building that? So that's about building the key strategic pillars, and then moving on to number 7. It's about kind of how do we build those pillars from the ground up. So take each of those pillars in turn. What do we need to make each one a reality? If we are focusing on, say, the breadth versus depth, or depth versus breadth issue, like, what does that look like? What does that mean for our service delivery? What do we need to develop? What do we need to build? How do we make that a reality? What order do we do those things in? How long will it take? So all of a sudden you're almost creating a very slight roadmap for each of these things to build them out. And then finally, once you've got the pillars, you get to your kind of strategy. So what I would say is, at this point, you've had 7 sessions where you've got the raw data, you've got the kind of what this could potentially mean, and then you've got the in a nutshell bits of them as well. So a good starting point for the development of this strategy on a page is to take all of those in a nutshell notes from each of the sessions. And what I tend to do is to get you can fit them all on a side of A4, is to get every single person to take one of those sheets of A4 and to individually articulate what that means to them. So how do you tell the story of that individually, first of all? And then you can share all of your individual articulations of what that sort of strategy foundation looks like, because each will be different, but there'll be a lot of crossover and there'll be a lot of similarities between all of them as well. So that individual narration, first of all, and then you can collectively agree how you articulate. It might be, we'll take this bit of Sally's articulation and that bit from Brian's articulation, and then we'll put it all together. And this is kind of what we feel collectively is the best way to articulate the foundations of our strategy. And once you've got it into a page, then you can start to think about, how does that look in a paragraph? How does that look in a sentence? And if you're feeling really sassy, how does that work in a hashtag? But that's quite tricky sometimes. So pulling back and looking at the journey that you're going to take, it's very much about focusing on looking, I've got it the wrong way around. Look back first, then look forwards, then look sideways, then see what themes are sort of bubbling up from that, and decide what the priorities are from them. Then focus on how that decides your direction of travel and kind of which way you'll go in and what your North Star is. Then focus on what the foundational pillars are for your strategy. What are the big chunky bits of work? Make sure that all of your work fits into those pillars. If they don't, then there's something wrong with the pillars that you've got, and that needs reworking. Once you've got those pillars, kind of build them out. You know, what do we need to do to enable us to make this happen? How long is it going to take? What are the interconnected aspects of all of that? And then collectively kind of arrive at this articulation of what the strategy on a page is going to be. And then moving on from that, the key, you'll have that, but then there's still going to be a certain amount of work to do, maybe in smaller teams, or, you know, you could do this collectively over time if you have it. But then it's all about what are the tactics to enable us to do that, what the KPIs, how do we measure that we're actually doing it. And then it's really key to just kind of do it, or at least start doing it. And once you start doing it, you can review it, you can refine it, and you can keep meeting and solving problems. But, you know, just to go back to kind of what's behind all of this as well, that open Google Doc is kind of where everything's going to come from. The gaps in between the sessions are super important. That whole, what does this mean in a nutshell, are really important. Yeah, and I think that the reason that this works is because the organizations own the process. So really own it. If it's not working for you, or if you need to tweak it, that's absolutely fine. If you adhere to a strict process that you haven't developed yourself, what you're going to get out the back end isn't particularly right people there. Make sure that the right people are involved. Cut out all the faff and try to make it as joyful as you can. Some of these sessions that I've been in have kind of brought organizations back together again, and things like the first session felt like real therapy, and all of that sort of stuff. So it can be quite a healing and build-in process for you as an organization, and especially for smaller charities. The final thought there is that the gaps between your sessions are more important than the sessions. So give yourself a bit of time to dream and to mull, and hopefully to empty the dishwasher and have some cracking ideas. And that's me. If you want to get in contact for a natter or a cup of tea, there's my email, and there's also my wonky website for you there. And I think I've done quite enough chatting, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Vic's just gone off for the school run now, but we've had a great question from Louisa here in the chat, and some lovely comments as well. Yeah, Louisa said, would all 8 sessions be in person, or could they be online?
I would say, even though it's brilliant to meet in person, what I tend to find is that if you're getting a group of stakeholders together, some of which may be beneficiaries or outside of your organisation, online gets the biggest turnout. And if you do it online, you can also record it for those people who haven't been able to attend. So online, and then I think that step number 9 out of all those sessions might be a good away day where everyone comes together. Rather than building the strategy, you're fine-tuning and tweaking something that's 90% of the way there. So yeah, maybe the 9th action is that you all come together physically, high five, and celebrate. Hope that was helpful and answered your question, Louise. Just seeing if is there anything else, Casey?
Yeah.
Through all the questions.
There are quite a few questions. So one, Lauren says, firstly, it seems like this process relies on digital literacy. How do you manage including people who can't use computers, i.e. the Google Doc?
Yeah, I have done projects like that, and a lot of the a lot of the youth work that I do means that the children, young people that I'm working with, because of safeguarding reasons, we don't have access to all of that to make sure that everything's safe and whatever. And you just tweak and flex around that. If it's a telephone call that has to happen, you can do that as well. You can mix it up between digital online sessions, cups of tea with people, telephone calls, whatever. I think the outcome of what you're trying to achieve is the same. The digital environment enables you to get the biggest bang for your buck and the biggest turnout normally, but for those who have access issues or digital literacy issues, you adapt accordingly. So it's have a cup of tea, have an in-person meet, have a telephone call, ask the same questions, assemble it the same way.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rosie's asked, if some stakeholders can't attend in person or online, have you found a way of engaging them through email?
Yeah, I've done that a lot. You can do polls. You can just do email questions. I think picking up the phone is always better because you get more nuance that way. It's not as ideal as being in front of someone or digitally present with someone, but needs must. If they're really important stakeholders that you need to speak to, you need to meet them on the platforms that they're on and in the way in which they want to be communicated with, and then retrofit that back into kind of your document or wherever you're keeping all of your information together.
Brilliant. And do you have an ideal number of people involved, and how long do you leave between each session?
Well, the weekly sessions, I would say, I think it's important to get a rhythm going. But like time for reflection is important, but if you're going to build it into the fabric of how you work, committing to 8 hourly sessions on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. does something to your brain, and you're like, okay, right, this is part of the way that I work now. So I think that's important. Sorry, I didn't get the second half of that question.
Sorry, and do you have an ideal number of people involved?
Yeah, well, for a lot of small and micro charities that I work with, it can be 3 people around the kitchen table. I think for online sessions, and this might be my failing as a facilitator, is that once you get beyond 10 to 12, it's very a similar dynamic to that big important away day where dominant voices can sometimes dominate, and people might not feel as safe or comfortable speaking. So 10 to 12, once you get beyond that, you're into sort of almost breakout room vibes and sessions. So, but the important thing is to decide who the stakeholders are rather than what the ideal number is. If there's 40 stakeholders and they really need to be spoken to and they really need to contribute, then you adapt the framework accordingly, don't you? It's not a one size fits all. It's just a direction of travel.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question from Liz is, how do you know when it's the right time to do this sort of strategy exercise for an organization? And if it's not the right time, e.g., senior leadership doesn't have the time, mental bandwidth to wrap their heads around strategy, how can we lay the groundwork to do this in the future?
Yeah, what a question. It's very strange that the rhythm of my working life is that from January to March, everyone is desperate and panicking and trying to get a strategy development done. When that annual cycle happens every year, it's amazing to me that it's always left to the last minute, but understandable based against the working constraints and the immediate deliverables that people have. So what I would say is, start by thinking about what the strategy cycle of your organization is, if there is one, and give yourself a good 4 months or so before that to start laying the foundations for it, and to make sure that you can hit that deadline of when your strategy is supposed to be live without too much panic and too much overwork. But also, like, the red flag in your question there is that if senior management haven't got the bandwidth to be thinking about strategy, that's a problem beyond strategy, really. That's a problem with your organizational culture and hierarchy, because traditionally it's always been the leaders of charities who have been responsible for strategy. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying it should be collectively owned now. But yeah, you've got some problems if the people above you aren't interested in the direction of travel and the vision for the charity. So there's conversations that would need to be had around that, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of leads on nicely to this question. And what would you advise if key areas of knowledge aren't represented among stakeholders, i.e., only the CEO knows anything about fundraising, no one knows about impact or whatever else might be missing?
That's such a good question, and something that for smaller charities, a lot of information is held in one person's head, and it's not the way that smaller organizations are structured is that conversations about fundraising, for example, don't happen because one person's responsibility is funding and they're just cracking on and doing it, as well as 1,000 other things. So I think when there's only one voice representing one particular aspect of an organization, then there is something about reaching out to your wider ecosystem. Do you know what I mean? Is there opportunities for other organizations who may have a shit hot finance person who's all about finance to come in for one session and just to kind of be a bit critical about certain aspects to add an extra layer to it? So I think this is something that crops up more and more with smaller charities, that you need to bring in outside voices to either validate what you're doing, because only one person has the keys to the fundraising kingdom, for example. And yeah, good to bring other people in if you can. And there's lots of, if you need to spend on consultancy, you can always do that, but I would always use your networks first, just to try and get that, to limit that singular voice on any particular aspect.
Thank you. Laura's just said, I like that, a sort of peer review of each other's strategy or key bits of it.
Yeah, no, I'm working with the young trustee movement at the moment, who are going on this process, and they're trying to engage a huge amount of stakeholders, and they're operating like a movement. It's quite new power focused. It's really exhilarating to be working alongside, but they're really laying the track in front of the train in terms of like, we'll do that first session, then we'll recalibrate and sort of think, what does that mean for the next session? And they're actually publicly sharing their journey and what's gone well and what hasn't, so that people coming up behind them who want to do that sort of mass co-created strategy can kind of not fall down some of the potholes that they've fallen down. So I would suggest all of you to follow the Young Trustee movement, to look at how they're doing that, because I think it's a really great way of kind of collaborating more openly across the sector.
Thank you, Wayne. That's a great example to look into. And just, I think, 2 more questions now. How do we make it work with just 2 staff, no volunteers, and limited involvement from the board members?
I think the red flag there is limited involvement from the board members, isn't there? Like, so there's a bigger issue there about why, and how do we work towards a plan where your board is actually more involved, because it's really important. But if there is only 2 of you, obviously there's sort of I don't know what sort of charity you are, but service users, beneficiaries, lived experience voice. But then there's also that kind of peer support. Are there other organizations that work in a similar field? Are there other organizations that we're connected to? What other voices can we bring in here? Because you'll be amazed, if you're 2 people in a charity, you will think you know absolutely everything about that organization, and you almost certainly do. But an outsider's perspective on what your organization is fascinating in terms of how you're perceived, and that kind of how you're perceived externally can be really helpful for kind of your strategy design as well.
Great, thank you. And sorry if I've missed anyone's question, but I've got one here. Any tips, tactics on enabling people in sessions to avoid getting stuck in the weeds/detail?
Yeah, it's constant. Yeah, it really is. And it's really interesting that, like, I find the detail very difficult, and that's why there's a particular point on a strategy journey when I naturally leave, when it comes to tactics, KPIs. How do we, how do we measure that? I'm really trying to get better at that, but then I presume that everyone has a similar, focus to me, and they don't. A lot of people are incredibly detail focused, and rightly so. The world needs every type of focus like that, but whoever's facilitating just needs to constantly pull back. And what I say constantly as a facilitator is, like, we're getting too much into the detail here now. It's really, really important, but let's just pull back a bit, keep pulling back. And maybe some of the detail stuff is to go into the Google Doc, which can then be condensed and used. But, like, in terms of the conversation, let's keep pulling back a bit. But yeah, no, it's, in 25 years working in the charity sector, that's something that I've struggled with to navigate and to pull people back. So you're right to highlight it. You've obviously had some experience with this yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, and Rosie also put, I was just thinking about this, maybe just reminding, we're talking about the big picture now, say for another session, ? And then Laura put, having a parking lot document can work for this.
Yeah, the old park it is really important. But also it's about time and place and sequencing, isn't it? And once you get to your strategy on the page, you'll see on the next step slide that the first thing is about tactics, KPIs, and that's all about the detail and the rigor and kind of how does this stand up. So there's a way of deflecting that it's not that the detail isn't important, it's just not important for now, but there is a stage in this process where that becomes the most important thing.
Brilliant. I think that's all the questions. And now everyone's saying thank you. It's been really helpful and brilliant as always, Wayne.
Oh, thank you, lovely people. And yeah, I've got a really bad cold today, so thanks for enabling me to plow through this. That's great. And you know, if anyone wants to hit me up on, well, it's only LinkedIn now, isn't it? Or LinkedIn or my email, which was in the slide deck, feel free. You know, I'm more than happy to chat individually or collectively again.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you ever find yourself with the need for an extra pair of hands, you know where to find us. And I've put a link to our website in the chat. But yeah, you're getting so much praise in the chat, Wayne. Can you see it?
I did, yeah, lovely. Thank you. And back at you all. Back at you all.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining again.
Thank you.